Every morning, just as the sun began to climb over the sleepy rooftops of Willow Creek, people stopped what they were doing to witness the same hauntingly beautiful sight. A tiny black girl, no older than 6, walked calmly down the empty street, her small hands gripping 5 thick leashes. The dogs beside her were enormous, powerful creatures, German shepherds with coats that shimmered in the pale morning light. They moved in perfect formation, silent, disciplined, almost military. No one knew who she was. No one knew where she came from. Some smiled, others whispered. A few pulled out their phones to record her, posting captions like, "The little dog girl," or "Future trainer in the making." But beneath the laughter and curiosity, something about her walk felt unsettling. She never spoke. She never smiled. And not once did anyone see an adult nearby. At exactly 7 a.m., she'd appear, same corner, same route, same quiet determination, before vanishing behind the old oak trees near the church. Rumors began to swirl. Who takes care of her? Where does she go? How does such a small child control dogs that size? And then one morning, the whispers reached the wrong ears, because when the police finally decided to follow her, what they uncovered was something no one in that town was ready for. Something that would shake every assumption they ever made about that little girl. And about what she was truly protecting, days turned into weeks, and the little girl became part of the neighborhood's rhythm, like the chime of the morning church bell or the scent of fresh bread from the bakery. People grew used to seeing her, yet no one truly understood her. Each morning she appeared at the same hour, her tiny figure framed against the rising sun, leading those 5 disciplined shepherds as though she were born to command them. Her steps were small but sure, her grip unshaken. Even when a car backfired or a stray dog barked from a distance, she never flinched. The shepherds surrounded her instinctively, protective but calm, their formation tightening as if they'd trained for it. To anyone watching, it was both mesmerizing and strange. A fragile child, with an authority that didn't make sense. Some neighbors adored her. They waved from porches and whispered, "That little girl's got courage." Others weren't as kind. A few crossed the street when she passed, muttering under their breath, "Where's her mother? Who lets a child like that wander around alone?" The town of Willow Creek had never seen a little black girl walk through its manicured streets with such quiet confidence, and some people just didn't know how to feel about it. Before long, short videos of her walks began appearing online. Captions called her the Dog Whisperer of Willow Creek. Millions of views poured in, each comment more curious than the last. She must be a trainer's daughter. Are those police dogs? Something's not right. Look how they move, like soldiers. But through it all, she remained silent. Every morning she'd take that same route, disappear near the church, and reappear the next day like clockwork, never missing a single dawn. And though the world watched, no one dared to step forward and ask who she really was, because deep down, everyone felt it. That little girl wasn't just walking those dogs. She was guarding something. Officer Marcus Reed had only been in Willow Creek for 3 weeks when he first saw her. A new transfer from the city, he'd traded crime scenes and night patrols for what was supposed to be a quiet suburban beat. But quiet never lasted long for Marcus. He had a nose for things that didn't fit. That morning, as he sipped coffee outside the precinct, he saw the crowd across the street gather like they did every day. Phones raised, eyes fixed. And then he saw her, the small figure in a faded yellow jacket, her braids swaying as she walked past 5 German shepherds twice her size. The sight stopped him cold. Something about it was too precise, too disciplined. Marcus had worked K9 units before. He knew that kind of synchronization didn't come from chance. It came from training, from command, from bond. Yet the girl's expression wasn't playful or proud. It was distant, heavy, like she carried something she couldn't speak about. Over the next few mornings, he watched her from his patrol car. Always the same hour, always the same route. She never interacted with anyone. The dogs obeyed subtle movements of her hands, almost imperceptible signals. One day, when a stranger tried to offer her a muffin, the shepherds closed ranks so fast Marcus's instincts kicked in. Protective behavior, he thought. Not aggressive, protective. That night Marcus replayed the memory in his mind. The look in her eyes reminded him of the kids he'd met in the city shelters. Children who'd seen too much, learned too soon that silence could be safer than words. But this one, she had soldiers beside her. Curiosity turned into concern. He started taking notes, times, direction, the way each dog moved. One had a scar across its neck. Another wore a metal tag marked with faded numbers. On the largest, he spotted something that made his pulse quicken. A small bronze emblem shaped like a badge. Half-worn, engraved with letters he couldn't quite read. Marcus leaned back in his chair, whispering to himself, "Who trained you, little one? And what are you trying to protect?" The next morning, a low mist clung to the streets as Marcus parked near the old bakery, his eyes fixed on the corner where she always appeared. At exactly 7 o'clock, like clockwork, she emerged from the fog, the 5 shepherds padding beside her in perfect rhythm. He waited until she passed, then quietly stepped out of his car. He told himself it was just to make sure she was safe. But deep down, he wanted answers. He followed from a distance, careful not to draw attention. The dogs seemed to sense everything. The faintest rustle, the echo of footsteps, the rhythm of his breathing. Once, the biggest shepherd glanced back, ears twitching, but the girl whispered something under her breath, and the animal's body relaxed instantly. It was command, not coincidence. They turned off the main road, heading toward the edge of town where houses looked older and lawns grew wild. Marcus's boots crunched over gravel as he trailed them, notebook tucked in his pocket, heart beating faster with every step. The air felt heavier here. Windows were boarded up, fences broken. This wasn't the side of Willow Creek the tourists saw. Finally, the girl stopped before a sagging iron gate at the end of a narrow lane. The dog's posture changed instantly, alert, silent, protective. She pushed the gate open with effort, and it groaned like it hadn't moved in years. Beyond it stood a house barely standing, its paint peeled away by rain and time. Marcus crouched behind a tree, watching as she and the dogs disappeared inside. Moments later, he heard faint barking from within. Not just 5 voices, but more. A chorus of whines and muffled growls echoed through the damp air. He gripped the edge of the tree trunk, his pulse pounding. This wasn't a playground. It wasn't a home. It was something else. He jotted a single line into his notebook. 5 dogs visible, more inside. Child unattended. As he slipped his pen back into his pocket, a chill ran through him. He knew he should call it in, report it as a welfare check. But something in his gut told him to wait, to learn more before involving anyone else. Marcus took one last look at the darkened windows of that house, then whispered to himself, "Whatever you're hiding, little girl, I'll find it." He turned to leave, unaware that this single decision, to follow her, was about to uncover a secret deeper and more heartbreaking than he could have ever imagined. Marcus couldn't shake the image of that broken house. All night it sat in his mind like an unanswered question. Who was that child living there? And how was she caring for those dogs? By dawn, he had made up his mind. He couldn't keep watching from the shadows. It was time to act. The next morning, 2 city vehicles rolled quietly up to the old gate. One marked Animal Control, the other a social services van. Marcus stood beside them, his badge clipped to his vest, trying to calm the uneasy knot forming in his chest. The moment the team stepped closer, the air filled with sound. Deep, thunderous barking that made every hair on his arm stand on end. The dogs burst from behind the fence, their bodies rigid, eyes locked on the strangers. It wasn't wild barking. It was formation, discipline, warning, hold. Marcus commanded, raising his hand. He could see it in their stance. They weren't attacking. They were protecting. Then, through the chaos, the front door creaked open. There she was. The little girl in the yellow jacket. Her eyes were wide with fear but full of control. "Stop!" she shouted, and instantly the barking ceased. The dogs fell silent and backed away, standing at her sides like sentinels. The animal control officer lowered his tranquilizer gun, stunned. "Sweetheart," he began softly, "is there an adult home with you?" She shook her head, gripping one of the leashes tightly. "It's just us." "Us?" Marcus asked gently. The girl nodded toward the dogs. "Them. They're my family." The words hit like a punch to the chest. Her voice trembled as she continued, "Please don't take them." "They're all I have." Marcus felt his throat tighten. The officers exchanged uneasy glances. Rules were rules. A child couldn't care for 5 large dogs alone. But something about the way those animals stood near her, calm and obedient, made it clear. She wasn't in danger. She was in charge. The senior officer sighed. "We'll file a report," he said quietly. "We'll come back tomorrow with child services." The girl's eyes widened. "Please." "Don't," but it was too late. They were already walking away. The dogs growled low, sensing her distress. She knelt down, whispering to them, "Don't worry. I won't let them take you." Marcus lingered for a moment, watching her small hands stroke each dog's fur with heartbreaking tenderness. In that moment, he understood something. She wasn't holding on to them. They were holding her together. He got back into his car, the storm clouds gathering overhead, and whispered to himself, "Tomorrow won't come easy for her." That night, the heavens opened. Rain hammered the rooftops of Willow Creek. Wind howled through the narrow streets, and thunder rolled like distant artillery. Marcus sat by his window, staring into the storm uneasy. Something in his gut wouldn't let him rest. By 7 p.m., he was back in his patrol car, headlights cutting through the rain. He turned down the lane where the old house stood, his wipers fighting to keep up. As he approached, his heart sank. The gate was wide open, swinging violently in the wind. He stepped out, rain soaking through his uniform in seconds. "Hello?" he shouted, his voice nearly swallowed by the storm. No answer. Then faintly he heard it, barking, sharp and desperate, mixed with a high, frightened cry. He ran. His boots splashed through puddles as lightning flashed overhead. The front door was locked tight. He slammed his shoulder against it until the frame cracked open, revealing darkness and chaos. The smell of wet fur, damp wood, and fear filled the air. His flashlight beam darted across the room. Torn blankets, empty bowls, overturned chairs. Then he saw movement. The lead shepherd, drenched and trembling, stood in the doorway to a narrow hallway. It looked at him, then barked once, short and deliberate, before running ahead. Marcus followed. Down the hall, past cracked walls and puddles of rainwater, he found her, curled up on the floor beside 2 older dogs, her small body shivering violently. He rushed to her side, lifting her gently into his arms. Hey, I've got you," he whispered. The dogs circled them, whining softly, their eyes pleading. As Marcus adjusted his grip, his flashlight caught something half buried under debris, a broken picture frame. He picked it up. Inside was a photo of a smiling man in a police uniform, standing proudly beside 5 German shepherds. The nameplate read, "Officer Daniel Carter, K9 Unit." Marcus froze. The realization hit like lightning. This wasn't just some abandoned house. It was a memorial. He looked down at the little girl, soaked, unconscious, clutching something in her hand. He carefully pried it open and saw a small metal badge, dulled by time but unmistakable. Her father's badge. "Oh my God," he whispered. He carried her through the storm, the dogs following close behind. One by one they pressed against his legs, guiding him, guarding her. He could feel it now. They weren't her pets. They were her father's partners. And when he never came home, they found his daughter and never left her side. As lightning cracked across the sky, Marcus whispered, "You weren't protecting yourself, little one. You were protecting his memory." By morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a fragile stillness. The house was quiet except for the soft panting of the dogs. Marcus sat on the floor beside the old couch, the little girl wrapped in his jacket, asleep. Sunlight broke through the cracks in the boarded windows, spilling over the room like a blessing. As the light touched her face, Marcus noticed something else. The walls. Faded photographs, old certificates, and newspaper clippings covered them. All of them told one story. Officer Daniel Carter and his K9 team. Heroes who had saved lives, stopped crimes, and served the city faithfully. Among the frames was a smaller picture, the officer kneeling beside a smiling little girl in pigtails, holding a tiny puppy. Marcus's chest tightened. She'd been here all along, keeping the promise her father made her keep. When she woke, she sat up slowly, eyes dazed. "Where are my dogs?" she whispered. "They're right here," Marcus said softly. "They never left you." She looked around at the familiar faces, each shepherd wagging its tail gently. Tears welled in her eyes, not from fear, but from relief. "I didn't want anyone to take them," she murmured. "They were my daddy's. He said if anything ever happened to him, I had to take care of his boys." "So I did," Marcus felt his throat close. He nodded slowly, unable to find words. Around them, the dogs settled, heads resting on their paws, their eyes heavy with loyalty and love. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was sacred. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, Marcus said, "You kept your promise, sweetheart." "Better than anyone ever could." She looked up at him, her small voice trembling. "I tried to be brave." "Daddy said brave people don't run away." Marcus smiled faintly. He was right. "And you've been braver than most adults I know." As the sun poured through the window, illuminating the room filled with photos, badges, and memories, Marcus realized that the story wasn't about a mysterious child with dogs. It was about a daughter keeping her father's spirit alive. One walk, one promise, one loyal heartbeat at a time. By the next morning, the story of the little girl with the dogs spread across Willow Creek like wildfire. It started with a single photograph. Marcus had captured it quietly. The little girl asleep with her father's badge clutched in her hand, surrounded by the 5 shepherds resting protectively around her. Someone from the department saw it, shared it, and within hours the image was everywhere. For once, the world didn't rush to mock or misjudge. Instead, hearts softened. Comments poured in from strangers across the country. "She's a hero. Her father must be proud. Protect her and those dogs at all costs." When the police chief arrived at the old house later that day, he stood silently by the doorway, taking in the photographs and medals on the wall. His voice broke when he finally spoke. "Daniel Carter was one of the best. I didn't know he left behind this." Marcus explained everything. How the dogs had returned to her after her father's death. How she had kept them safe, fed and trained alone, honoring her father's last words. There was no neglect, no danger, only devotion. That afternoon, the department held a small ceremony outside the station. The townspeople gathered, faces filled with a mix of shame and admiration. The little girl stood beside Marcus, her hair neatly braided, her tiny hand holding the leash of Bravo, the oldest and most loyal shepherd. The chief knelt before her, tears glistening in his eyes. "Your father gave everything to this city," he said gently. "And now everyone knows his daughter carries that same heart." He pinned a small medal to her coat, for bravery and compassion. The crowd applauded softly, their guilt melting into pride. For the first time since her father's passing, the little girl smiled. Weeks passed, and Willow Creek changed in quiet, meaningful ways. The old house that once stood forgotten was repaired, painted, and renamed Carter's Paws, a sanctuary for retired and injured service dogs. Marcus visited often, helping her clean the kennels and deliver supplies. He became the guardian she never had, and together they built something that turned grief into grace. The girl spent her mornings training new dogs, her father's whistle hanging around her neck, her voice soft but firm. The same confidence she once walked with now inspired others. Neighbors who once crossed the street to avoid her now stopped to bring food and blankets. Kids from the local school volunteered after class, laughing as the dogs wagged their tails with joy. One afternoon, as the sun painted the sky gold, Marcus watched her running across the yard with the dogs at her side. The same girl who once walked alone through cold streets, now surrounded by love. She turned to him, smiling shyly. "Daddy used to say heroes don't always wear badges," she said. "Sometimes they wear collars." Marcus nodded, a soft pride swelling in his chest. "And sometimes," he replied, "they walk beside the smallest heroes of all." From that day forward, every morning, the townspeople of Willow Creek saw her walking those same 5 shepherds again. But this time, there were no whispers, no judgment, no fear, only smiles and gratitude. The girl who once walked in silence now walked in legacy. As the years went on, Stories of bravery continued to fade and reappear like echoes in time, but hers never did. The little black girl who once walked 5 German shepherds through a neighborhood that didn't understand her had grown into a symbol of loyalty, love, and courage. And though her father's voice had long gone quiet, his promise still lived through every bark, every step, every heartbeat that followed her down those sunlit streets. Because sometimes, heroes don't wear uniforms. Sometimes, they wear leashes and walk beside the ones who refuse to give up. If this story touched your heart, remember to like, share, and subscribe, not just for us, but for every story that deserves to be heard. Tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? And if this reminded you of someone you love, share their story too, because courage doesn't always come in loud moments. Sometimes it's carried by a little girl in a yellow jacket, walking 5 loyal hearts who never left her side.